Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Safety Wire podcast. My name is Tim Wade, your host. Oftentimes, when discussing aviation safety, it's at a very high level. We talk of what we are doing and how we are doing it, but not so much why we are doing it. Today, I would like to take an in-depth look at the intricate role standards play in shaping the basis of our quality and safety programs. I'm joined here today by one of the foremost people in the quality management field. He is the founder and CEO of SimpleQuE and currently on the rewrite committees for two of the main aviation quality standards currently in practice. Mr. Jim Lee, thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to the Safety Wire podcast.
Hey, Tim, it's my pleasure. Thanks.
Outstanding. Yeah, it's great to have you on. Great. We're finally able to do this. We've been having some great discussion back and forth, so I'm happy we were able to sit down and start talking. So tell me about SimpleQuE and why you started the company, why you got involved.
Well, SimpleQuE has been around for 18 years now. We're a consulting company doing consulting, training, and auditing of quality management systems and safety management systems as well. I started the business because I saw too many bad consulting companies out there when I was involved in the certification and accreditation world, and saw it as a great opportunity to really improve the level of consulting out there for companies that were really struggling with understanding and complying with the standards and getting certified.
Outstanding. No, I get that. A lot of times you hear the phrase, you just bought your certification, you just bought your accreditation. It's good to have a grounded company who's really looking for the benefit in the organization and not just obviously making a paycheck. So you've been with SimpleQuE and you started SimpleQuE 18 years ago. How long have you been actually working with quality management systems?
I've been working with quality management systems for about 35 years before ISO was even adopted or implemented. It was a draft standard when I started using it, and saw that the good practices involved with that in working with our supply chain and using that as our criteria in evaluating and approving our supply chain.
Outstanding. That's incredible tenure you've had so far in the industry. Did you have any experience in aviation prior to getting into quality management?
Sure. My degree is in electrical engineering, and one of the interest areas for me was avionics. And my first job out of college was as a design engineer, working for a company called Systems Research Laboratories, designing avionics for the Air Force and NASA, and working on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
That's incredible. Well, you should be very proud of how the industry has pushed forward, because if you look at an aircraft nowadays, it's all avionics. That is one of the biggest the biggest trends we have right now is everything's electronic, and it's better to hire electricians and people with electrical background these days. So have you seen, getting back into aviation, from your experience in our industry, have you seen the safety culture in aviation change over time since you've been involved in this field?
Yes, I have. So if you think about quality management systems, starting with ISO 9001. Mm-hmm. So ISO 9001 is the broadband quality management system for any kind of company, manufacturing, service, government agency. Anybody could be ISO 9001 certified. There was obvious interest and good practices in place with that standardization and commonality, and a variety of industries piggybacked on that. The aerospace industry included. Automotive was another popular one, medical device, and so on and so forth. But from the aerospace standpoint, that grew as ISO 9001 plus for the aerospace industry, and ISO 9001 was the building blocks. With that popularity, there were other management system standards that came into play. The safety management system standards, the environmental management system standards. We now see the IT or cybersecurity management system standards, and all of those have a foundation either around ISO 9001 from a quality management system standpoint, or have a document structure and formatting that is consistent, so that the different standards can be harmonized or integrated within a company. So the quality management system standard talks about, we don't want to be a safety management system standard, and that needs to be somewhere else. And however, there's so much overlap and commonality with some of the requirements that it makes sense to have some integration of the systems or the processes and the procedures in some cases. And so the standards now have a structure to follow to help with that integration.
Exactly. So, in which are the main standards that you're dealing with today? And you are on the rewrite teams for 2 of them. So, what are those standards as well?
So in the aerospace world, there's 3 standards that you can become certified to, and there's a ton of aerospace standards, but there's the 3 core standards that are involved with a company becoming certified. The first is AS9100. It's the design and manufacture of products or services in the aerospace world. The second standard is AS9110, which is for the maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities, the repair stations. And then the third standard is AS9120, which is for aircraft parts distributors. I'm involved in the rewrite teams for 9110 and AS9120.
Outstanding. Now, not to have any spoiler alerts for these standards coming up, but are you able to give any insight to the changes that you will be addressing with the revisions?
So I really can't talk about a lot of details there. However, there are some key themes of they're trying to make minor changes, not make major changes. And because the standards are written around ISO 9001, the ISO 9001 was supposed to go through the start of a rewrite, a 5-year review and rewrite in 2020. Well, that's when COVID hit, and no one had an appetite to start working on a revision to the standards. So ISO 9001 voted to delay another 5 years to do their 5-year review. So the aerospace industry realized that they've got too many irons in the fire, tweaks they need to make, minor things, topics that didn't get covered and discussed in the current standard that needed to be updated and couldn't wait another 5 to 8 years to be changed. Things like product safety, human factors, culture and ethics, advanced product quality planning, the cyber and data security issues, remote auditing with COVID, risk management needed some potential enhancements or improvements. So those are some of the themes and topics that the committees were tasked to consider and evaluate where they might shore up some requirements or improve the clarity of expectations and needs for the industry. And, for some of those topics like product safety, human factors, and culture and ethics go hand in hand with the safety industry as well.
Exactly. And I appreciate all of that information. I definitely won't press you too much for any more with what you're rewriting. You had mentioned a moment ago overlap between QMS and SMS. And so I'm heavily involved in our safety management system here. You're obviously heavily involved in quality management, and they handle many different components. However, in my experience through aviation, a lot of times we see quality and safety overlap. Me personally, my quality team works hand in hand with me on the safety side. What are you seeing in our industry right now? Is it best practice to have these 2 teams kind of mesh together, or have you seen it work better when they're separate pillars?
That's a interesting discussion. Every company has a different culture and environment, and it depends on the resources and the people and the staffing and the backgrounds and experience. There are some organizations where quality, health, safety, and environmental are all under one umbrella. In other areas, in other companies, functionally they need to be separate, and but they need to be working together. And so the best practices is that there's congruency and collaboration, but they shouldn't be separate islands. You don't want a separate safety management system corrective action process from the quality management system corrective action process. Or, a nonconformance is a nonconformance. A safety incident is the same thing as a nonconformance. You can use similar tools and techniques or software systems, and they don't have to be separate. And you can code quality issues separate from environmental issues, separate from safety issues, to kind of slice and dice and analyze data. But to have the same structure and processes in place, procedures even, where there's commonality, it just makes sense. You don't want to have separate systems, and it helps the entire organization as well, having one process to deal with incidents or quality issues, and not having to deal with different systems and processes.
I completely agree. I think the more spread out your processes get, the more confusing, the more risk you start to put into the organization. For those who are not involved in quality and safety on a daily basis, I think it tends to get confusing sometimes when you see the two standards, you see the two teams. When I speak about SMS, oftentimes people think that I'm talking safety. That must mean hard hat safety and protecting people and employee safety. However, it goes much deeper than that. SMS programs, as you know, go throughout the entire organization, as do quality management systems. Could you explain a little bit into the confusion when it comes to how quality management discusses like product safety versus safety through an SMS program?
Yeah, so let me talk about SMS. I'm going to answer that question in two ways. Sure. From an SMS standpoint, safety management system standpoint, one of the aerospace standards incorporates safety management systems, and that's the maintenance, repair, and overhaul, the AS 9110 standard. That standard, you have to have a safety policy, safety objectives, safety management system processes and practices in place, which makes total sense from an MRO facility standpoint. And taking a step back, ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, has SMS requirements, and EASA, the European agency, has adopted those, and the FAA has been slow to follow. But there are safety management system regulatory requirements. So the ICAO, EASA, those are all regulatory requirements. We see that within the standards, sections of the standards covering product safety, covering human factors, covering ethics and culture, those are trying to start to not impose a safety management system or put safety management system requirements in place, but they're starting to emphasize the importance. And there's so much overlap. Let's just talk about human factors for a second. There's so much overlap between quality management system breakdowns and safety events and issues, and the breakdowns with human factors, that it just makes sense that you include human factors in your quality system as well, and not just on a safety management system side. In the current AS 9100 standard, there's product safety requirements where the intent is to try to make the companies aware of the product life cycle and the product safety impact. Too many companies misinterpret that to be personnel safety, and then that gets into the SMS side, the safety management system side, which is not what is really intended. And we see some references to safety management, but not safety management systems, which adds to the confusion. And I'm hoping that the rewrite committees, help to try to clarify some of that. But I can tell you that it's been very clear that we will not touch SMS in the standards that I'm involved in. And what we find in the industry is those are typically customer flow down requirements or regulatory flow down requirements that companies have to meet. and are independent of the quality management system standards.
So you had mentioned human factors throughout the quality management as well as SMS, where I work through. Throughout the data that I've reviewed and researched, I'm noticing a massive metric that human factors holds with most incidents. In a research study I participated in, it held in excess of 3,000 reviewable incidents, and about 84% of them came back to having human factors as a causal factor or the root cause. How are you seeing quality management used to combat human factors issues?
Human factors is covered in the quality management system standards in a variety of ways. The AS 9100 standard is trying to emphasize and put focus on human factors, and in the last version added human factors as a new criteria, and is working to enhance that in this next rewrite. Part of what has been mandated is that at least one human factors cause has to be identified with nonconformances when it comes to the certification body findings. When they respond to the certification body from audit findings, they have to input a human factors cause associated with the finding, no matter what it is. And then in the standard for any nonconformance, they want to see human factors considerations so that you don't just have human error and as a sole root cause and retraining or firing the operator as the sole corrective action. They really want you to go deeper than that and go further and understand that there's a lot more involved with the human factors. Your statistic about the research study that you had mentioned, I was participating in a NASA conference a few years ago, and they threw out some statistics to say that on the quality management system side, or in the case of NASA, the catastrophic failures, they attribute 75% of NASA's catastrophic failures to human cause factors. Mm-hmm. They also stated that between 65% and 90% of catastrophic issues in the industry as a whole are due to human factors causes. On the quality management system side, I believe that has been a weakness in the past in understanding. When it came to the AS 9110 standard and the SMS overlap, that was pushed harder, and we're seeing more of that flowing into the quality management system standards. One encouraging area that I've seen in the aerospace industry is the aero engine community has created an aerospace standard called AS 13100. And that's not a certifiable standard. It's a customer flow down and a self-compliance requirement, but it has extensive requirements and expectations on the human factors side of the business. Yeah, so on this aero engine standard, they get into a just culture where it's a fair culture. It's not penalizing you for reporting. It's an open reporting culture, and the leadership involvement and the leadership commitment to human factors awareness, including the training and at all levels, so that there's the management support and the structure of not penalizing people for reporting issues, and then for having employees having means of speaking up and not being afraid to speak up, and then on the quality management system side, they're trying to embed the human factors into the quality management system and helping with that risk reduction in the human factor side, and trying to be more proactive, and just continually learning and improving through the processes and understanding that human factors impact. So that's been encouraging to see, and all of that is pushing the QMS, even further and stronger into that area. And then on the on the NASA conference that I attended a few years ago, the one of the luncheon speakers was an engineer on the Columbia shuttle when in 2003 when that catastrophe happened.
Mm-hmm.
And 20 years later, this gentleman is crying in front of an audience of several hundred people, talking about the breakdowns and the human factors issues that occurred with that event and the learnings that NASA had gone through. And it was very touching and very emotional, and still, many, many years later. And for those of you that may not remember, that there were two shuttle disasters, one in 1986, and that was the Challenger shuttle, and with the O-rings. Most people remember the O-rings, but even the O-rings, it wasn't an O-ring failure. It was if ineffective problem reporting of a normalization of deviance where they were having issues with O-rings, and they weren't reporting it, and it became acceptable practice because they didn't have problems that resulted in the shuttles not launching or blowing up, and stifled communications about the O-rings, not and lack of top management involvement in critical safety issues. And then with the Columbia disaster, that was some insulation foam that was falling off during launch and upon reentry, and in those cases, that was it had occurred before, and it just became an accepted deviance that geez, we haven't had a catastrophe, and it's happened before, and we're still studying it and trying to analyze. And the other human factors involved was the rush to launch, the pressure to get launches off, and they're still studying this insulation falling off issue and saying, well, it hasn't caused a problem yet, and some people are saying, well, it's an issue, and management saying, well, in God we trust, all others bring data. Well, I shouldn't have to prove that it's unsafe, and so that culture, that management culture, that safety culture, it's all, whether you're talking about safety management systems or quality management systems, especially in the aviation industry, people die. It's not a car that you pull over to the side of the road. It's you don't want a plane or a rocket or something falling out of the sky.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to see that even over the past 30 to 40 years, the issues we've had, we still have them, possibly traces of them, but we are still experiencing, as you mentioned with NASA, the rush to launch. For MROs, we hear the rush to RTS and aircraft to return it to service, to get it back out on the line. FBOs see the same thing. Our AOG mobile technicians, they see the same thing. There's always a pressure to maintain schedule. And I think we've grown a lot. As we've always said, a lot of disasters had to take place years ago to make us as good as we are today. So I know we've grown a lot in the past 30 to 40 years to be better about raising our hands. More organizations are standing up and adopting the just culture that you mentioned. I literally end my safety briefs usually by saying, send me a hazard report. Anything, hopefully we don't have a major hazard coming through, but tell me the floor is a little wet. Tell me there's a cone not in the right spot. Tell me something. There's always something we can improve upon. So I'm glad to see us moving in the right direction.
Well, it's a continual improvement activity and process, and that's the world of quality management system standards or safety management system standards. Is trying to be proactive and make improvement over time and analyzing data and trends, and that's all part of the process of getting better and making improvements. The aero engines community and that aero engine standard that came out is a supplement to AS 9100 that the customers are flowing down, and for them, we can't have, it's just not acceptable to have a defect with an engine. We just can't have it. And so, zero defects is a must. And how do we do that? And so they have these extra requirements above and beyond AS 9100, because AS 9100 is not good enough for the aero engine community.
Exactly. And we've talked over this meeting so far of how there's a lot to motivate us to be better and to improve safety and to improve quality and move forward. From what you're seeing in organizations moving towards an ISO or an AS standard, moving towards the compliance with that standard, are you seeing more organizations step up to do it as a best practice, or more of them step up as possibly a mandate to operate their business with certain companies or governments or other countries or organizations? What are you seeing as a leading motivation to move towards an ISO or an AS standard certification?
What's interesting is the AS standards, the certification quantities over the last few years during COVID and through now, the quantity of companies getting AS certified in the U.S. has jumped drastically, far exceeding ISO 9001 or some of the other ISO standards. And there's three reasons companies get certified. One is your customers requiring it, it's pushing you, says you have to. Sure. The second reason is you want to use it as a tool to gain new market segments. You want to get into the aerospace markets, and you want to use that certification to help you open more doors. Or the third reason is that there are leadership teams, owners of companies that realize and recognize that, a management system, a formal management system is going to help me be better, have fewer headaches, fight less fires. And they see that as a valuable tool to push the organization to be a better company. And so those are the three reasons we see companies get certified, and a combination thereof. And sometimes you get companies kicking and screaming, and it's always fun to see when a management team, the light bulb goes off because they were forced to get certified and they didn't like it or didn't want to, and then years down the road they realize, oh my gosh, this is the best thing that's happened to this company, and we realize now the benefits of it, and hadn't before. And so those are always interesting stories. You don't necessarily like to hear it other than the fact that management's come around to understanding the value and the benefit after the fact. And sometimes it's hard to quantify or communicate in the dollar and cents terms, or in the time wasteful terms, or the cost of poor quality terms, to justify getting certified or just even being compliant, using it as a tool to improve the business.
Yeah, I always associate a new quality or safety practice as, when you're trying to tell your kids to try a new food and they're kicking and screaming, they don't want to try it. And then the next thing you know, it's their favorite food on the menu, and, you've won them over. Just takes time. Right. Well, Jim, I'm going to go ahead and close this out a little bit here. I cannot thank you enough for being on the podcast. For those of you listening, if you are interested in any of the AS standards that Jim has been discussing, please check out SimpleQuE, get some information from him. Add Jim Lee on LinkedIn. He's got some great information to be put out. Jim, thank you for being here. I truly appreciate it.
Tim, I appreciate talking with you and the opportunity here to be a part of your podcast, the Safety Wire podcast. Thanks.
It's been my pleasure, sir. Take care.